One day you look at them and something feels different. Nothing about them has changed, but somehow everything has. The voice sounds ordinary, the smile looks ordinary. Even the things you once found irresistible suddenly seem strangely normal. And you wonder what happened. Maybe they changed, or maybe you finally stopped filling in the blanks. Because sometimes we don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with the version of them our brain creates, and that version can be almost impossible to compete with. Your brain is surprisingly good at completing incomplete information. Give it a few attractive details, add some mystery, add a little attention. Then let imagination handle the rest. Suddenly, a normal person becomes extraordinary. They seem deeper than everyone else, kinder than everyone else, more interesting than everyone else. You barely know them, yet somehow your brain has already written their biography. And the strange part is this: you may genuinely believe the story. Psychologists have studied this tendency for decades. One important idea is called the halo effect. Edward Thorndike described it in 1920. He noticed that people often let one positive impression influence everything else they think about someone. Someone seems attractive, so they also seem intelligent. Someone seems confident, so they also seem trustworthy. Someone makes you laugh, so suddenly they seem emotionally mature. The brain loves shortcuts, and attraction makes those shortcuts even stronger. Research by Dion, Berscheid, and Walster in 1972 helped demonstrate something similar. Physically attractive people were often judged more positively. This became known as the "what is beautiful is good" stereotype. Your brain isn't necessarily asking, "What evidence do I have?" It's often asking, "Does this person feel good to me?" That's a very different question. And it can create a dangerous little illusion, because attraction can make uncertainty feel like mystery. Silence can feel like depth, distance can feel like longing, confidence can feel like wisdom, and ordinary kindness can feel like destiny. Think about that. Your brain can turn missing information into positive information. You don't know what they're thinking, so you imagine something beautiful. You don't know what they're like under pressure, so you imagine them handling everything perfectly. You haven't seen how they treat people when they're angry, so your fantasy conveniently leaves that chapter blank. This is where romanticizing becomes powerful. You aren't necessarily lying to yourself, you're editing reality, and you're using the nicest possible version. Why does the brain do this? Partly because prediction is one of its favorite tricks. Your brain constantly predicts what comes next. It uses incomplete information to construct a usable reality. That system is incredibly useful. It lets you recognize a friend from a silhouette. It lets you understand a sentence before someone finishes speaking. It lets you identify an object in bad lighting. But the same machinery can create a fictional person, especially when emotions are involved. Dopamine adds another layer. Early romantic attraction can produce intense motivation and attention. Helen Fisher and colleagues studied romantic love using brain imaging. Their research found activity in reward-related brain regions when people viewed photographs of someone they were intensely in love with. The important point is not that love is fake. It isn't. The feeling is real. But the feeling doesn't guarantee that your interpretation is accurate. That's the trap. You can feel something incredibly strongly and still misunderstand the person causing it. And then something happens. You spend enough time together. Reality starts leaking through. They get tired. They become impatient. They make selfish decisions. They misunderstand you. They disappoint you. They reveal habits you never imagined. Suddenly, the fantasy has competition, and reality usually wins. This can feel like heartbreak, but sometimes nothing was actually taken away. The illusion simply stopped being convincing. You might even feel guilty. You think, "Why don't I see them the same way anymore?" Maybe because you finally have more information. The mysterious person became a familiar person. The perfect person became a complicated person. The character became human. And humans are complicated. We contain contradictions. Someone can be generous and selfish, loving and inconsiderate. brilliant and foolish, kind and cruel, confident and deeply insecure. There is no requirement for a person to be one thing, but romanticizing usually removes those contradictions. It turns a person into a character. And characters are easier to love than humans. You can admire a character without dealing with their bad habits. You can imagine their intentions, you can rewrite their mistakes, you can explain away their behavior. You can even turn rejection into proof that the connection was special. That's how powerful the fantasy can become. Sometimes the less you know someone, the easier it is to idealize them. Because reality needs evidence. Fantasy doesn't. Fantasy can operate without permission, and distance gives it room to grow. This is one reason mysterious people can feel unusually attractive. You have empty spaces, your brain fills them, and your imagination rarely says, let's make this person disappointing. It usually says, let's make them fascinating. But then you get closer, and the empty spaces disappear. You discover what they actually believe. You discover how they treat strangers. You discover how they react when they don't get what they want. You discover what happens when life becomes inconvenient. These moments are powerful because they reveal something photographs cannot. Patterns. Anybody can seem wonderful for an afternoon. Patterns take time. That is why knowing someone can sometimes make them feel less magical. But it can also make your feelings more real, because real affection doesn't require perfection. It survives information. That is the difference. Fantasy says, I love who I think you are. Reality says, I know who you are, and I still choose you. Those are completely different experiences. One depends on imagination, the other depends on evidence. And this is where growing up can feel strangely lonely. You start noticing things you once ignored. You stop explaining every red flag. You stop turning inconsistency into mystery. You stop calling emotional unavailability being complicated. You stop calling bare minimum effort secretly caring. You stop confusing potential with personality, and you stop falling in love with someone's future version. That shift can feel cold. But it isn't necessarily cynicism, it can be clarity. You begin to understand that everyone has a private world you cannot completely see. Everyone has motives you won't always understand. Everyone carries insecurities. Everyone has habits that become obvious with time. Everyone eventually disappoints you somehow, not because everyone is terrible, because everyone is human. The goal isn't to stop seeing beauty in people. The goal is to stop adding beauty that isn't there. You can admire someone without worshipping them. You can love someone without pretending they're perfect. You can be attracted to someone without inventing their personality. And you can walk away without deciding they were secretly evil. Sometimes the person wasn't horrible. They simply weren't the person you imagined. That realization can hurt more than anger. Because anger gives you someone to blame. Clarity gives you nothing to blame. It just gives you the truth. And truth can be surprisingly quiet. One day you look at the same person, the same face, the same voice, the same smile, but the movie inside your head has ended, and for the first time you're watching the actual person. Not the character, not the potential, not the fantasy, just them. And strangely, that can be the beginning of real love. Because real love doesn't need you to misunderstand someone, it needs you to see them completely, including the parts that aren't convenient, including the parts that aren't beautiful, including the parts that don't fit your story. Maybe that's why growing up changes attraction. You stop asking, how amazing could this person be? And start asking, who are they when nobody is performing? That question is much harder, but it is much more useful because eventually everyone becomes ordinary. The mystery fades, the novelty fades, the fantasy fades. What remains is character, and character is what you were actually looking for. So if someone suddenly seems less magical than they used to, don't panic. Maybe you didn't lose your ability to love. Maybe you gained your ability to see. Because the day your fantasy disappears isn't always the day love ends. Sometimes it's the day reality finally gets a chance to begin.